My name is Jack, and I used to think the worst thing that would happen to someone was dying alone. I don't believe that anymore. There are fates far crueler than death, and if you're hearing my voice, then I need you to listen to every word. People tell survival stories because they want to inspire others. They want to prove that the human spirit can overcome anything. This isn't one of those stories. This is the truth about how four people who loved each other set out on what was supposed to be the best vacation of our lives, and how the ocean stripped every piece of humanity from us until there was nothing left to save. If I could go back to the morning we climbed aboard that sailboat, I wouldn't hesitate for a second. I'd burn the rental contract, throw the keys into the harbor, and drag everyone home kicking and screaming. Instead, I smiled, climbed aboard, and unknowingly sailed straight into the worst place I have ever known. The trip had been Pablo's idea from the beginning. My husband had always dreamed of sailing through warm tropical islands, hopping from one tiny stretch of paradise to another without a schedule or a care in the world. He spent months showing me glossy brochures filled with turquoise water, white beaches, and sailboats drifting beneath skies so blue they looked painted. Whenever work became overwhelming, he'd pull one of those brochures out from his desk drawer and grin at me. 1 week, he'd say, just 1 week where the world can't reach us. Eventually, I stopped pretending to resist. Seeing that smile was enough to convince me. Pablo invited his younger sister, Cami, almost immediately. They had always been inseparable despite living in different states. Cami had inherited their mother's quick laugh and fearless personality, while Pablo had inherited their father's calm nature. Together they balanced each other perfectly. She was the kind of person who could turn waiting in a grocery store line into an adventure. Pablo was the one quietly making sure everyone got home safely afterwards. Cami insisted her husband Singh came along as well. Singh had an endless fascination with cameras. He documented everything. Every meal, every sunset, every ridiculous joke someone made was carefully recorded on one of the three cameras he packed. He said memories faded too quickly and photographs were proof that happiness had actually happened. None of us teased him for it because we all secretly loved looking through his pictures afterward. Somehow he always captured people at their happiest. The four of us met at the marina just after sunrise. Warm air rolled in from the ocean carrying the scent of salt and blooming flowers from the nearby shoreline. Pelicans skimmed low over the calm water while expensive yachts rocked lazily against their docks. Our sailboat waited at the very end of the pier, gleaming in the morning light as though it had been polished specifically for us. 40 feet long with two sleeping cabins below deck, a tiny galley kitchen, fresh water tanks, emergency supplies, and enough room for four adults to spend a comfortable week exploring secluded islands. This thing is nicer than my apartment, Cammy laughed as she stepped aboard. Pablo wrapped an arm around my waist. 7 days, he whispered. No phones, no emails, just us. Zing was already filming before the ropes had even been untied. He panned his camera across the marina, stopping dramatically on each of us as though we were celebrities boarding a luxury yacht. Future Jack, he called with a grin. Say something for the documentary. I laughed and shrugged toward the camera. We're all coming back sunburned and 10 pounds heavier. Everyone laughed. Looking back, that's the last truly carefree moment I can remember. The first 2 days passed exactly as we'd imagined. We sailed between tiny tropical islands surrounded by coral reefs, so colorful they looked unreal. Schools of fish darted beneath the boat like flashes of living silver. Dolphins appeared one afternoon, racing alongside us for nearly 20 miles, while Cammy squealed with excitement every time one leaped from the water. Pablo cooked fresh mahi-mahi on the small grill attached to the stern, while Singh insisted on photographing everyone's plates before allowing us to eat. Every evening we anchored near another quiet beach where the waves whispered gently against the hull as stars filled the sky. Without city lights, the heavens seemed endless. Pablo and I lay together on the deck one night, listening to the soft creak of the masts, while countless stars stretched from one horizon to the other. I've never seen this many, I whispered. He squeezed my hand. You spend your whole life looking down. Out here, you finally remember to look up. I wish that memory had stayed beautiful. On the morning of the third day, something felt different. It wasn't anything obvious at first. The wind had faded almost completely. The ocean looked strangely smooth, like polished glass instead of moving water. Even the birds we'd seen consistently since leaving the marina had vanished. The silence settled around us with an uncomfortable weight. No gulls, no dolphins breaking the surface, no distant engines, just the occasional groan of the sailboat shifting gently between us. Pablo noticed it too. Feels off. Cammy looked around uneasily. I was just thinking the same thing. The humidity became unbearable by late morning. Sweat soaked through our shirts despite barely moving. The air felt thick enough to eat with a spoon. Dark clouds gathered along the western horizon, rising higher and higher until they resembled towering mountains made of charcoal. Singh lowered his camera for the first time all trip. I don't like those. Neither did I. Pablo checked the weather radio. Static. He adjusted the antenna. More static. Then a voice broke through for only a moment. Developing tropical storm. The rest dissolved into crackling interference. We should head back, I suggested. Pablo nodded without hesitation. I was already thinking it. The sails caught what little wind remained as we turned toward the marina. At least we hoped we had. Without reliable GPS and with clouds swallowing the sun, direction became surprisingly difficult to judge. Pablo relied on charts and compass headings while I helped manage the sails. Behind us, the black wall of clouds spread across the horizon with frightening speed. Within 30 minutes, daylight disappeared. The first gust slammed into the boat hard enough to throw Zing against the railing. The mast groaned, overheard, as the sails snapped violently. Rain followed almost instantly, not in drops but in solid sheets so dense I could barely see Pablo standing 15 feet away. The ocean transformed from smooth glass into towering hills of water that lifted the sailboat skyward before dropping it into valleys so deep the surrounding waves blocked every view of the horizon. Lightning exploded somewhere ahead of us. The flash turned the world white. The thunder arrived immediately afterwards, shaking the entire boat. Cammy screamed as another wave crashed over the bow, drenching all of us in warm seawater. Buckets, life jackets, and loose equipment skidded wildly across the deck. Singh struggled to pull one of the sails down while Pablo fought to keep the boat pointed into the monstrous waves. We have to reef it, Pablo shouted. I can't reach it, Singh yelled back. The next wave hit before anyone could move. The boat tilted so violently I was certain we were about to capsize. Water poured across the deck past my knees, sweeping a cooler overboard before disappearing back into the sea. I grabbed the railing with both hands as another blast of wind screamed through the rigging like a living thing. The mast bent alarmingly. A sharp crack echoed overheard. One of the support lines snapped. The sail whipped free, slamming back and forth with explosive force while Pablo desperately wrestled the wheel. Hours blurred together. Rain stung like thrown gravel. Every muscle in my body burned from clinging to the boat as wave after wave tried to tear us into the ocean. There was no up or down anymore, only chaos. Sometimes the bow pointed straight toward the sky. Other times it plunged so deeply into the water I thought we'd never surface again. Night fell without any of us realizing it. The storm swallowed the whole world. And somewhere in the endless darkness, without any of us noticing the exact moment it happened, we became hopelessly lost. When dawn finally came, the storm was gone. The ocean rolled beneath us in long, heavy swells, and for a few seconds I felt genuine relief. We were battered, soaked, exhausted, but alive. Then I looked around. There were no islands, no shoreline, no other boats. Nothing but water in every direction. Pablo checked the GPS and his face drained of color. It's dead. He tried the radio next. Static. He hit the side of it, adjusted the antenna, tried again. Nothing. The engine coughed once when he turned the key, sputtered weakly, and fell silent forever. We told ourselves it wasn't that bad. We rented this boat from the marina. Someone would notice we were overdue. The Coast Guard would search. We just needed to stay calm. For the first day, we rationed food and water carefully. For the second day, we still joked occasionally. By the third day, nobody laughed anymore. The sun became our enemy. It sat above us every day like a giant white eye, burning our skin until blisters rose across our shoulders and necks. Salt dried in thick crusts on our clothes. Our lips cracked so badly that speaking made them bleed. We drank tiny, measured sips of water and pretended they were enough. On the fifth day, the fresh water ran out. Cammy cried quietly below deck while Singh stared through his camera, scrolling through old photos as if he could crawl back into them. On the sixth day, the food was gone. That was when the sharks appeared. At first, there was only one gray shape beneath the boat, then another, then three more. They circled slowly, just deep enough that we could never see them clearly for long. Sometimes a fin cut the surface for a second before disappearing again. They stayed with us, patient, waiting. The first person to die was Thing. It happened on the seventh day. He spotted something floating in the distance and suddenly became animated for the first time in days. There, he shouted, a buoy, maybe supplies. It was perhaps 100 feet away, rising and falling with the swells. Pablo told him to wait, but desperation had already taken hold. Singh tied a rope around his waist and climbed over the side. The water looked calm, too calm. He had only swam 20 feet when the sharks vanished. For one terrible second, I thought that meant he was safe. Then the ocean exploded. A massive shark hit him from below with enough force to lift half his body out of the water. Singh screamed, a raw animal sound I had never heard from a human being. Before we could pull the rope, a second shark seized his leg. The rope went taut. For a moment he hung between us and them, arms flailing, eyes bulging with terror. Pull, Pablo shouted. We pulled. The sharks pulled harder. The sound his body made when it came apart was horribly soft, like wet fabric tearing. Blood spread across the water in a widening cloud. One of his arms surfaced briefly beside the boat, still wearing his wedding ring, before another shark dragged it under. Cammy collapsed, screaming. I think part of us died with him. After that, Cammy stopped sleeping. She sat on the deck clutching her wedding ring, talking to herself. Sometimes she laughed at things no one else could see. Sometimes she spoke to Singh as though he were sitting beside her. On the 9th day, she pointed toward the horizon. Do you see it? There was nothing there. The island, she said, smiling. They found us. Pablo and I exchanged a frightening look. Hallucinations. She climbed onto the railing before either of us realized what she intended. Cammy, wait! She jumped. She hit the water awkwardly and screamed immediately. One ankle bent sideways beneath the surface. She tried to swim away, panic overpowering the pain, but the current carried her away from the boat. Then the jellyfish reached her. Hundreds of translucent purple bells drifted around her like flowers. For a heartbeat, they looked beautiful. Then she started screaming. She clawed at her arms, her face, her neck. Red welts erupted across her skin whenever the tentacles touched. Her breathing became ragged and desperate. Pablo, she screamed, help me. We tried throwing a line, but she was too far away. Her throat began to swell. The screams turned into choking gasps. She reached toward us with both hands, eyes wide with disbelief, and then she simply floated there, unable to breathe, while the jellyfish pulsed around her in the darkening water. A wave rolled between us. When it passed, she was further away. By sunset, we couldn't see her anymore. Only Pablo and I remained. My husband tried to stay strong for both of us. Every morning he scanned the horizon and said the same thing. One more day. One more day. One more sunrise. One more chance to be found. On the 11th day, rain finally came. We laughed like madmen. We held out buckets, cups, our own hands, catching every drop we could. Cold water ran down our faces and into our mouths, and for a few glorious minutes I believed we might survive. That night Pablo developed a fever. At first he said he was just tired. By morning he was shivering violently despite the tropical heat. The salt sores on his arms had turned angry and yellow, and a sweet, rotten smell clung to him. Infection. There was nothing we could do. He drifted in and out of consciousness for 2 days. Sometimes he thought we were home. Sometimes he asked where Cammy and Singh had gone. Once he smiled at me and asked what we should make for dinner. Then late on the 13th day, he became clear again. He grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Jack, I'm here. If something happens to me, don't say that. His eyes filled with tears. I love you. I broke then, completely. I held his hand and cried while the boat rocked gently beneath us. He smiled one last time, exhaled, and never inhaled again. The silence afterward was worse than the storm. I sat beside my husband's body as the sun went down, listening to the endless creak of the sailboat and the soft slap of waves against the hull. I was alone, alone in the middle of an empty ocean, with no food, no rescue, and nothing left in the world except the man I loved most. I didn't know yet that the worst part was still coming. I sat beside Pablo until the sun disappeared beneath the horizon. I don't know how many hours passed before I finally realized I had been talking to him the entire time. I told him stories he already knew. I reminded him about our first apartment with the leaking ceiling and the broken heater we couldn't afford to replace. I laughed through cracked lips, remembering how he burned our first Thanksgiving turkey and insisted the smoke detector was too sensitive. I apologize for every stupid argument we ever had. I apologize for not being stronger during the storm. I apologize because I couldn't bear the thought that the last thing he'd ever heard was me telling him everything was going to be okay. The ocean never answered. It simply rocked the boat back and forth, as though trying to lull me to sleep. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Sing screaming. I saw Cammie's hand reaching toward us. I opened my eyes again and found myself staring at Pablo. The silence became unbearable. People think starvation feels like endless hunger. It doesn't. Hunger is only the beginning. After long enough, the pain fades into something worse. Your body starts shutting itself down piece by piece. My muscles cramped whenever I tried to stand. My heartbeat felt slow and heavy, like it had to force itself through thick mud. Every movement left me dizzy. My thoughts drifted in and out as though someone kept dimming the lights inside my head. I searched the boat over and over, hoping we overlooked something. A forgotten protein bar, a sealed bottle of water, a bag of rice tucked behind a cabinet. Anything. I found a packet of salt, 3 fishing hooks with no bait, an empty can of peaches that still smelled faintly sweet. I scraped the inside with my fingernail until the metal shined. There was nothing left. The rainwater we had collected was almost gone. I measured every swallow, promising myself each sip would be the last until the next sunrise. On what I believe was the 15th day, I began seeing people. A fishing boat drifted past only 100 yards away. I screamed until my throat bled. The men aboard smiled and waved. One of them lifted a hand as though inviting me over. I stumbled to the railing. The boat vanished. There had never been anyone there. Later that afternoon, I heard music, soft guitar, laughter. The smell of grilled food drifted across the water. I could almost taste it. When I looked over the side, I saw nothing but my own reflection, gaunt and hollow-eyed, staring back from black water. I realized that my mind was beginning to die before the rest of me. The gulls arrived the next morning. 5 of them landed on the mast, watching me without making a sound. They weren't afraid. Animals know when something is almost dead. One hopped onto the deck and stared at Pablo. I chased it away with the last of my strength. It circled once and landed again a few minutes later. I screamed at it. It didn't care. By sunset, there was 9 of them. That night, I made the decision I had been pretending wasn't waiting for me. I wish I could tell you there was a dramatic moment, some great internal battle. There wasn't. My body had already decided long before my mind admitted it. I crawled to Pablo. My hand shook so badly I dropped the emergency knife twice before I could hold it. "I love you," I whispered. The words barely escaped my cracked lips. "I'm so sorry." I rested my forehead against his one last time. Then I closed my eyes. I won't describe every detail of what followed, not because I don't remember, because I remember too clearly. The knife felt impossibly heavy. Every moment felt like a betrayal. I cried until there was no tears left, speaking his name over and over as if he might forgive me. When it was done, I sat there for a long time, unable to move. The pieces I held in my hand didn't look like food. It looked like the end of everything we had ever been. My stomach revolted. I retched over the side until nothing came up except for bitter strings of saliva. I told myself I couldn't do it. I threw it away. 10 minutes later, I climbed down, found it again, and brought it back. Survival doesn't erase your morals. It erases the distance between them and desperation. The first bite nearly broke me. Every instinct in my body screamed that what I was doing was wrong. I tasted salt, blood, nothing else. I forced myself to swallow. Then I vomited again. The second attempt stayed down. I hated myself immediately, more than I had ever hated anyone. When I finally stopped shaking, I curled up beside what remained of Pablo and begged him to forgive me until exhaustion pulled me into a dreamless sleep. For the first time in days, I woke with enough strength to stand. It terrified me. I hated the energy returning to my body because I knew exactly where it had come from. I refused to look toward the stern. I refused to think about what I've done. Instead, I scanned the horizon again. Water. Nothing but water. The day grew hotter. A strange ache settled into my stomach. At first I ignored it. Stress, grief, an empty digestive system remembering how to work. By noon the ache became a twisting pain. My gut cramped so violently that I collapsed onto the deck. Moments later I vomited, again and again, until my ribs felt like they were cracking. My hands began trembling uncontrollably. Cold chills swept over me despite the blazing tropical sun. Something was terribly wrong. The cramp spread through my entire body. My vision blurred around the edges. I tried standing and my legs folded beneath me. The deck tilted even though the sea had gone calm. I crawled toward the shade, leaving streaks of vomit behind me. Then I heard it. A low, distant rumble. An engine. I laughed. A broken, hopeless laugh. Another hallucination. My brain had invented boats before. It was doing it again. The sound grew louder. I covered my ears. I'm not listening, I whispered. You aren't real. A shadow passed across the deck. For a heartbeat, I thought a storm cloud had returned. Instead, I heard voices. Real voices. There's the vessel. I've got movement. Easy, easy. I forced my eyes open. Above me hovered a helicopter, bright orange. Impossible. A rescue swimmer splashed into the water beside the boat. Someone climbed aboard. He took one look around the deck and stopped. His face emptied of all expression. Another rescuer stepped up behind him. He turned away and covered his mouth. I tried to tell them my husband's name. No sound came out. The first rescuer knelt beside me and pressed two fingers against my neck. Stay with me, he said. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But my body had nothing left. As they lifted me into a stretcher, my head rolled towards the shoreline. For the first time in over 2 weeks, I saw land, green hills, a lighthouse, buildings. It wasn't a mirage. We had drifted into the middle of nowhere. We had been carried in a wide circle by the storm, slowly edging back towards civilization without any of us realizing it. The helicopter carried me toward shore while the paramedic kept telling me to stay awake. I remember the blur of rotor blades, oxygen pressed over my face, and someone saying my blood pressure was crashing. Every time I drifted toward unconsciousness, Pablo's face appeared beside me, smiling the way he had on the first morning of our trip. I kept trying to reach him, but he only grew farther away. The next thing I remember was white lights, hospital lights. Machines beeped somewhere beyond the haze while doctors shouted words I couldn't understand. They pumped fluids into my veins, started antibiotics, rushed me into surgery, and fought to undo everything starvation, dehydration, infection, and my own desperation had done to my body. A Coast Guard investigator visited my room the following afternoon. His uniform was perfectly pressed, but his eyes looked exhausted. He didn't ask many questions. He simply wanted me to know what had happened. The storm hadn't carried us out into the endless ocean. It had trapped us in a slow-moving current that spent nearly 2 weeks dragging us in a massive circle. The search helicopter spotted our mast less than a mile offshore. Less than a mile. I stared at him, unable to speak. Then he quietly added the detail that destroyed whatever was left inside me. Based on the condition of the boat and the medical examiner's findings, they believe rescue had arrived approximately 30 minutes after I made the decision I had sworn I would never make. 30 minutes. I closed my eyes and wished the storm had taken me instead. That night, my fever worsened. The doctors called it septic shock. My organs had begun shutting down one after another. They said that the prolonged starvation, dehydration, infection, and contaminated flesh had overwhelmed my body. They tried everything modern medicine could offer, but some damage couldn't be undone. The monitor beside my bed became the only sound in the room. Slow, steady, then slower still. I thought of Pablo, about Cammy laughing on the dock, about seeing filming dolphins beside the bow, about 4 people setting sail beneath a perfect summer sunrise. I was the only one who came back, and I wasn't really coming back at all. The last thing I heard was someone calling the time. Then the monitor became one endless tone. Don't let the postcards fool you. Don't trust the calm water. And if the ocean ever offers you silence, turn around, because sometimes there's no way out, only the illusion that you almost made it.